Hello, I am Zinfogel. So, I hope everybody had a great time during the holidays and I wish you a happy new year. But it is 2021 and there is new events to cover. So here we have the electric and steel type egg event. And I've been working on the Eggmon compendium. It's coming along nicely and it does mean that I analyze these sync pairs ahead of time. So hopefully that helps with the pace of this video. But if you're new here, I always analyze Eggmons with a 4-star potential and 3 out of 3 affinity as a minimum. I believe this is a good threshold for Eggmons to start working efficiently, but with all that said, we can get started here. Our first big team is a striker Electabuzz. And I am going to spare you some time here. This thing is absolute trash and you shouldn't use it. And the reason is that this is a suicidal Eggmon. That means that striker Electabuzz's main damaging move has a recoil tag. And in this game it is not rare for Pokemon to do over 3000 damage to a target. So if you launch a reasonably strong wild charge with Electabuzz, it's one-shotting itself in the process. So this is a kind of Pokemon who fails in its prime directive. Because you cannot strike with a Pokemon who is dead. And in this kind of recoil striker, you have to have several tools to mitigate recoil damage. And Electabuzz only has a Standfast 3, so this is just not enough. And because Electabuzz has Wild Charge, it gives competition to Elesa and Striker, which, funnily enough, at 5 stars, they both have the same attack stat. But Elesa is just straight up better. She has more speed, she has a grid, more Standfast styles, inertia, 6-star EX. There is just no way to justify this. Like, this thing is only perk over Elesa is buffing crit, but that is not enough to salvage it. This is just bad. Up next is support Electabuzz, and unlike a striker Electabuzz, this thing is not nearly as bad because it can operate this role successfully, at least. So this guy is an attack buffer. You get a +6 attack and +2 speed for the entire party, and some paralysis utility, 10% chance of paralysis with Thunder Punch. And you also have Thunder, but this is a meme because Electabuzz does nothing to support Thunder. So if you want to strike with this move, you should be using Mew or Sinnoh Elesa or Striker Raichu. Use anything but support Electabuzz, so the focus is on buffing. Now, the unfortunate part is that this type of buffing kit is outclassed by Hilbert and Samurott because he gives you more buffs in the same span of time. Under 4 rounds of combat, Hilbert gives you +6 attack and +4 speed, so if you're looking for these buffs, you should be sticking with Hilbert anyway. But it doesn't mean that Electabuzz cannot do it. Lastly, we have Tech Electabuzz, and historically, Tech Eggmons are the most useful because sometimes they have roles that gachas cannot replicate, but that is not the case for this guy, because you get Thunder Wave, Kallen can do that, and you get Brick Break, Broly can do that, but Electabuzz comprises this in a neat little package alongside Regeneration, but I don't even count Brick Break as utility because this only removes Reflect and Light Screen, and crits bypass them anyway, so it rarely comes in handy. The focus here is on paralysis. And if you want to paralyze reliably, you could be using Erika and Vileplume, who have Stun Spore with Piercing Gaze, so it's not looking good for Tech Electabuzz until you remember that this guy is an electric type. So I cannot believe I am saying this, but this is a rare electric type paralysis applicator. And in this game, the most reliable paralysis users are off types, so if you want to get paralysis synergy for N, for example, you have to resort to Pikachu with a Thundershock grid with hostile environment tiles, or you could be using Sophocles or Volner. Well, Volner is a given partner, but it's still not reliable paralysis. So this guy is actually, I would say, the most reliable paralysis electric type applicator, because Sophocles can guarantee paralysis with Nuzzle, but it is so miserable to use, extremely difficult to feed a trigger move used to afflict the status conditions. So Thunder Wave can be fixed with the Troublemaker 1 as a Loki skill to guarantee the accuracy, and then you get a nice paralysis user who is an electric type and activates electric type skills and has sustain. I still think it's outclassed, but it has an issue in that sense, and Paralysis Synergy 3 also gives it some oomph. If it gets some coincidental buffs from Sinnoh Blue, for example, then it could do some okay-ish damage, I guess. And here we have the Electrode batch, and given how poorly these guys are built, there is no doubt in my mind they are entering the standard egg pool after the event is over. Either way, here we have a Striker Electrode, which is a self-sufficient Striker. You get extra special attack with crit buffs, like what else can you ask for? And a strong 3-bar move with accuracy issues, but you can fix that through supports or with Rain Dance. So it's not the end of the world. But your first instinct here might be that this is outclassed by Striker Raichu if you scout these Eggmons ahead of time. Because Striker Raichu, let me see that real quick. Striker Raichu has an identical kit. It also has the same buffs as well as Thunder, but Piercing Gaze to fix the accuracy by itself. But Electrode does have advantages. Specifically, it has more strength, it has better multipliers, as well as Thunder Shock for the 1-bar span. So these two things distinguish it from Striker Raichu. I will discuss Striker Raichu more in depth when we get there, but well, case in point, it's still okay, and if you can incidentally fix Thunder accuracy, then Electro deals better numbers than a Striker Raichu, but used by a tiny margin, so I think a Striker Raichu is just better used for the practicality of it. This is our friend Support Electrode, and this guy suffers from tanking Eggmon syndrome. This is a term I coined because it happens so often on Support Eggmons when DNA gets lazy, because they give them a tanking kit, but the Support Eggmon's stats are just terrible. Even at 5-star potential, like this is not really functional for tanking anyway. Like 3-star Misty has better bulk than a 5-star Electrode, which is frankly pathetic. And I guess it's a special defense tank with paralysis utility, but the stats are so bad that this is going to get exploded on any regular encounter, so don't even bother. Use Misty. It really bothers me how smug Electrode looks when all the kits are so bad. Either way, here we have a Tech Electrode. The gimmick is paralysis. You get a Spark with Hostile Environment 1. There's a 51% chance of paralyzing, complemented by regeneration. So, we kind of discussed this on Tech Electabuzz, where we already have amazing free-to-play paralysis applicators. There is Erika and Kalem, so they give you far more utility than Electrode ever could. This thing is niche, is damaging while paralyzing things, which is kind of outclassed by things like Elesa and N. Elesa has a Spark with Hostile Environment 1 and a much beefier attack stat, where N has Ball Strike. I don't need to tell you how powerful that is. So if you wanted to murder things while paralyzing them, you could be using those instead. It doesn't remove the gimmick from Tech Electrode, but there are better units for sure. My boy, Scotty, forgot that he has a Pikachu. What is happening? So here we have the Raichu batch, and Striker Raichu is probably the most infamous of the bunch. You have probably heard about this kid already, because it's just an extremely self-sufficient Striker. You get special attack buffs, crit buffs, and a brutally strong 3-bar move, with a 30% chance of paralyzing the target for some utility. And this thing is a little problematic because it has accuracy issues, but Striker Raichu fixes that with Piercing Gaze, so it cannot miss attacks under any circumstances, even if the enemy accrues evasion buffs. So this thing is good, strong, buffs quickly and hits hard. Like, what else can you ask from a Striker? And in that sense, people are claiming that this is a Striker Kangaskhan 2.0, because Striker Kangaskhan has like 50 more base power with Mega Kick, but Striker Raichu can have super effective damage as well as Electricity Rain for a multiplier. So I'll give you that. This is stronger than Striker Kangaskhan, but I am not sure if I can claim this as a reasonably great Striker, because you could be using N and Zekrom, but what I will give you is that Striker Raichu is extremely easy to use. You just toss it on a battle and it will deal damage, which is actually kind of hard to ask for these days, and that's a really appreciable quality. It's a decent Striker. Good, not the epitome of electric type damage, but if you need an electric type Striker, then I think this is easier to use than How or Power Reserves for Team Pikachu, because it just buffs. It's really brainless. So yeah, I like it. No complaints. Support Raichu. So this is yet another support Eggmon who has a special attack buffing kit, and I can think of support Lapras, support Charizard, support Squirtle. they have the exact same buffing kit. So if you have one of them set up already, this is very skippable. And it's rare when this specific kit is useful, because you could be using Roxanne to buff instead, who gives you +4 special attack, +4 speed, and +4 defense. Yeah, you don't max out a special attack, but your special striker can probably do that anyway. And you get more incidental buffs from Roxanne if you are merely using the unit to buff. Although there is a Swift. Speedy entry is negligible because your speed stat is atrocious anyway. But for this specific kit, I think that support Charizard does it better. I may be biased here, but support Charizard has the exact same kit, but the difference is that support Charizard has a much stronger move to try and complement your kit. It has overheat instead, and you can fix this with the Dauntless Loki skill, and then you have a good attacking move for your support Eggmon. So there is more contributions that support Charizard can perform in the course of a match over support Raichu, because I guess you can give this an electric terrain multiplier, but it's only for Thunderbolt, it's not going to hit hard. And Swift is incidentally useful, like it never misses, I guess, but it's not like Oak is Swift, where he debuffs the enemy while doing that. And well, I mean, it's inoffensive enough that I cannot really complain about this kid, but I just think support Charizard does it better, as well as Roxanne. Next on the chopping block, we have Tech Raichu, and DNA really tried to make a unique Eggmon here, because it is another user of Electrode. This is AoE speed debuffs, and we also get Hunter's Instinct, which enhances the power of your moves, the more you drop, the target is speed. So it's a cohesive kid, like this is the first Eggmon who has a proper BP multiplier, and at maximum efficiency you get like 72 base power Thunderbolt, which is not saying much, so you're not getting damage from this thing by itself. Now the problem here is that there is a better Electrowave user, and that is Clement, almost forgot his name, and there is also Clay, who is a free-to-play AoE speed dropper. Now the problem with speed drops is that they are almost never useful except on select legendary arenas like Cobalion, because on the course of a standard match, you are always queuing 3 actions per round, so even if you drop your enemies' speed to -6, they are still queuing actions efficiently anyway, because they are still waiting out your own. So this doesn't come into play except to buff Cakewalk and Hunter's Instinct specifically. And if Clement didn't exist, then this thing would have a fine niche, but Clement is just better. It has Piercing Gaze, so it cannot miss Electrowave. This thing has 95% accuracy. And Clement has tanking utility and just does more with his skill. So if you want an Electrowave user, go to Clement, but this thing still has an issue, because you can partner it with Clement himself. And Clement just abuses speed drops very well, because he has innate Cakewalk on his Zinc, and you can enhance it with another Cakewalk tile from his grid. So with Raichu, partner with Clement, they activate type skills, and you could accelerate speed drops with dual Electrowave, or maybe just keep spamming Electrowave with Raichu while Clement does other things like using Parabolic Charge or buffing with Mod Slap or something or other. So together they can make a decent core. Like, it's not hopeless. Tech Raichu still has a gimmick at least. And here we have the only Steel-type Eggmons of this batch, the Magneton, and I kinda have a soft spot for these guys because, I don't know, I just think Magneton is neat. So, Striker Magneton is very much like a Striker Raichu in that it is a decent, self-sufficient Striker. You buff a special attack, you can buff Crit, this is really important, as well as your defenses, so you get some extra bulk, and you have a strong trigger move, decent, and not otherworldly, but it does good damage at 5 out of 5. You can also incidentally lower special defense to get even more damage. So it's cohesive, it's a good kid, you get an okay multiplier, like what else can you ask for? And I dare say that Striker Magneton is the best free-to-play Steel-type Striker around, because its competition is Wickstrom and Molayne, so the bar is not set very high, but Wickstrom can overall deal better damage, because he has a tech multiplier on his Zinc, but Wickstrom just has his whole host of issues derived from stance change mechanics. Like, if you want to buff attack with Wickstrom, you first have to use Gyro Ball or whatever, and then you can buff your attack and critical hit rate, and you also have to King his Shield before enemy sinks, otherwise Wickstrom gets obliterated by its blade form stats, and Molayne is just whatever as a striker. Like he only buffs attack, he has okay offenses, but say Striker Magneton is better because he has less self-sufficiency issues, and Striker Magneton can tank better because he has more HP than Molayne. So yeah, it's a little slow compared to Molayne, but overall, just because of self-sufficiency, like I think it's good. Like I don't mind it. Like I actually want to invest in one just to show how okay it can be. But this is a tier below Steven, Gloria, and even Jasmine as strikers. Like you cannot compare with them. But if you have nothing better to use, Magneton does a good job. I like it. Support Magneton suffers from tanking Eggmon syndrome, so it's not worth looking at. But this guy is a physical tank, maximizes defense, you get unbending, that's kinda nice. Quick cure, prevents flinch and trap from Murkini once per battle, but Swanna just outclasses it on every way. Support Magneton's only niche is having Mirror Shot. It has a 30% chance of lowering accuracy, so if the enemies cannot hit you, then they cannot kill you, but oh boy, this thing is dying before you even get a dodge out of Mirror Shot. Last but not least, we have Tech Magneton, the last Pokemon for this video. And this guy is another Screech user, so very comparable to Nanu, and it has an identical kit to Eggmons like Tech Onyx, Tech Lickitung, but Tech Magneton distinguishes itself because it's an Steel type Screech user. So this can pair with Steven, for example. You can debuff people for Steven and activate type skills, so that can be handy, but is that worth the slot? Because I think Leer is better than Screech ultimately. I don't think I need to tell you about how useful defense drops are. Like whenever you drop an enemy's defense, it's basically like using X attack again on your striker, so they are very potent, but we have a plethora of Screech users, and this thing is niche, is just activating type skills alongside Steel types, so if you need that, Magneton can do it. It's really forgettable otherwise. And as usual, we are closing this with a quote-unquote tier list, but these are more so recommendations for which Eggmons I think are worthwhile investments relative to other Eggmons. Because I don't want you spending your resources on a Weedle or whatever, because that would be really wasteful. There are usually gachas who outclass Eggmons, and well, it's still your account. Like, if you have a favorite Eggmon that you want to invest on, then hey, go nuts. Like, I'm not stopping you, because any Eggmon can be decent once invested, but I just think that some Eggmons are better, they have better niches in general. So, when I was making the Eggmon compendium, I adjusted my metrics on how to categorize Eggmons, and I want to make a distinction on some of my parameters here. Like, has a niche, that means that the Eggmon has good utility and maybe has a niche that cannot be found on gacha units, but it's still situational at best, because it's not as splashable as things like a Striker Kangaskhan or Tech Kangaskhan, and you kind of have to cram it on team composition to justify the use, but it doesn't mean that it's bad. It still has valuable contributions to the metagame. And I also put Eggmons on this category who are more than likely outclassed by a better striker, like for example Magneton. I don't need to tell you that Steven is better than Striker Magneton, but it doesn't mean that the Eggmon is bad. It still performs its role really well, to the point that I would recommend it if you don't have a better striker for that specific role. And comparable means that the Eggmon is probably outclassed by another gacha, but it still has perks that can make it more useful on certain circumstances, like for example Tech Magneton, who is another Nanu, but it can activate Steel type skills, so that can be a valuable asset on certain team compositions. And outclass means that the Eggmon is just not that great, because there is another unit who just does its role strictly better on every capacity. And well, I think that's it. I hope you enjoyed the video, thank you for your support, and I hope I see you another time.